this is the very simple, basic forecasting model that Claude came up with. The key thing here is I didn't write a single line of code. I told it what I wanted and it built the model, ran it, gave me a chart, and that's the forecast. And by the end of this video, you'll be able to create a chart, a forecasting brief with no knowledge of Python forecasting, but you can use an AI agent, 20 minutes to build out a prototype, and then ask Claude to learn more about that process to prepare yourself for a job description before applying. In my last video, I talked about how instead of getting another degree, you can use AI to prepare yourself for your next job, or use AI to look for a job and develop the right skills to apply for those jobs. And so in the video today, I'll be going through that process so you can see how you might do the same. So I'll start with opening up Claude Code in the same way that we've talked about in this playlist here, as well as all the other setups that we've chatted through. And I'll use CC, which is the alias. And then we'll also use the Option W shortcut to talk to Claude so Claude can more quickly figure out our intent. So the first thing I'll do to kind of frame this is actually, let's just look up some job descriptions that require forecasting. So I'll start my transcription app now here with Option W. Hey, Claude, can you help me search for jobs that require forecasting and see which companies are hiring for them? And then once this happens, we can let Claude do the search. And in a previous video, I've already set up how you can set that up as well. And then you'll see here, as it's going through searching for a forecasting job, it will use the skill as well as the tool that we set up to find that job. And before I build anything or build out a portfolio or a tool to do that, this is like a real skill that we can use to kind of frame all of our work that we're going to do. And here I'm looking at this and I see that, let's say there are a lot of different forecasting roles, but the one that maybe stands out just because I previously worked at Airbnb is, let's say, this community support forecasting and demand planning analyst role. And so oftentimes either you're a FP&A analyst or a data scientist, you'll need to forecast. And so you can use AI to learn how to do that, build out a prototype or tool, expand on it, and maybe even build out a full side project so that you can show a hiring manager or a recruiter that's something that you've done for an entry-level data scientist or FP&A role. And so here, the next thing I'm going to prompt Claude for is, hey Claude, for that Airbnb job that asks for demand forecasting, I want to build a forecasting model to prove that I can do this. Can you search the web for a public data set for cloud compute demand GPU capacity time series API free download 2026 CSV? I want to forecast how much computing power the next frontier AI model will need. I need something I can download as a CSV with no API key and no account, just a direct download link. And then once I'll send that message out, we can let Claude search the internet and get us the data that we need. In the previous video, we talked about how one of the bottlenecks of trying to forecast a model is finding the right data for that. And at any point in time that you want to do this end-to-end process, you'll actually have to learn new things that you haven't done before. And one of the things is getting the data. When you're doing a degree in a class, they will generally give you a very hard structure as well as very clean data that you can use to do this. But now with AI, you can kind of break that barrier, and it looks like we already have something available here. And so now that we have this data, we can actually ask Claude to use this data to forecast something. So I'm going to actually start steering Claude a little bit just so that it can use some of the best practices tools with forecasting and Python. So I'm going to tell Claude to stop whatever it's doing right now because it's starting to do some stuff. But in general, you can also just let Claude do that already. But now I'm going to actually tell it to use one of the data sets that it found. And let me just ask it to summarize what it found really quickly. Hey, Claude, can you just tell me what data set you found so far, just so that we can actually pick which one we want to use? And then you'll see here, now that we've kind of prompted and steered Claude, generally you can let Claude go all the way through, or you can also kind of steer Claude in the direction that you already have in mind. Because I already have a general idea of what I want, I'm going to let Claude basically tell us what they found and then steer it in that direction. And so from this, I'm going to basically do another voice to text transcription. Hey, Claude, let's go with the Epoch AI dataset. It has the most models that I can download it directly. Can you now download that CSV into this directory in this project here so we can save that data and then start building out a forecast model? And then can you tell me how many models and what columns are useful for forecasting and what date ranges look like? And then save that as a CSV file here. And then now that we've saved that, or not saved that, now that we've prompted Claude to save that here, we'll give it a few moments to actually do out that task. And then we can actually ask Claude to help us break down the steps to build out a forecast. And obviously I'm glossing over a lot of the details, but if you were to do this yourself, I would highly recommend at any point in time as it's building it out, asking Claude to explain certain concepts if you don't understand it, so that as you're building this out, you can extend it a little bit more than what it does automatically. And so I'll let it cook for a little bit and then we'll come back to it once it finishes. So it looked like Claude has finished summarizing what it found. So I'd recommend if you were to do this, and it's actually probably very useful for you to kind of go through this step by step, see what it tells you, what it finds, and then also read through this. And in the last few videos, we kind of set up our second brain with Obsidian so we can structure the data. But when you do this, this might not exactly be placed in the right place. And so you can steer Claude in that direction so it creates the right files and puts it in the right place. And then now we can kind of move forward. We can read this, understand what data is there. And obviously when you're going through this yourself, I recommend just asking Claude to explain certain things for you. But because we're going to basically show how we can actually build a forecast from this, I'll now just tell Claude to use this to build out a forecast, but I'll steer it in the direction that I know and I want and use certain tools to help accelerate that. So I'll now start the voice to text transcription again. Hey Claude, now using this data, I want to build a forecasting model. I want to predict how much compute the next frontier AI model will need in 2027 and 2028. Use the training compute FLOP column and the publication date. Find the maximum compute used per year, fit a trend line, and forecast forward. Show me a chart of the results and save it as a PNG file here, and then open that file when you're done so that I can see it. But before you do this, can you install UV if it's not already installed using the bash script that you get online that will allow us to install it in the native way. And then when you use UV to manage the Python dependency, write a Python script directly in this repo and this project and run it using UV with NumPy and matplotlib with pandas. So we don't have to set up a virtual environment manually. And then with that, we can paste that voice to text transcription. And you'll see here that this really accelerates our ability to learn and code when we don't have to type anymore, because you can talk much faster than you type, and you can kind of see how Claude is now able to get the context it needs really quickly. And then as we let Claude go through this, I want to kind of talk through a little bit of what I just said so that you can understand what is happening behind the scenes. And any point in this process where you don't understand, I would recommend you just to ask Claude. And so when we make a chart in Python, oftentimes we'll need to create a virtual environment to activate it, to install our packages. But generally that ends up being a lot of steps. And before we do anything useful manually, we'll have to install the virtual environment, install these tools manually. But when we now use UV, we can do all that in a much easier or quicker way with one tool. And so now we'll let Claude go through this process, write the Python script, create that forecasting model. And then as it goes through this, you can actually learn and understand by opening up another window. Let's say you wanted to now ask Claude side by side as it's working through this. What are we doing? How are we doing this? What is UV? How to think about forecasting in general, and how do we think about compute? And so you can basically go through this exercise, and you'll see here when we're looking at the jobs, you can see there are plenty of jobs that needed forecasting. And you can go through any one of these things so that you can ask Claude the best way to learn about what you need for these roles, build out a portfolio, a prototype that shows that you build something useful. And the farther you extend this, the more useful it will be. And as we go back down and look at all these different things that Claude is doing, if you're unsure about something, just ask Claude. But with that, we'll let Claude finish this, and then we'll see what it outputted so we can understand how to reproduce this, do it for a different use case. A common forecasting use case is revenue, sales. What will our sales and revenue look like in the future? And so you can look at your own internal data to help your adjacent teams do that with forecasting and get better estimates. And I'll now just let Claude go through this process, and we'll kind of come back to this once Claude is done with that. And so you'll see here that Claude has created a image and a chart. And when you look at this chart, because I asked Claude to open it up, it's opened it up for me. You can ask it how to interpret it, what to understand about it. And you can also see here that Claude found some data issues with it. As you can see here, the process of this is learning how to learn with AI and then building skills on top of that. Instead of getting a new degree which will be a lot more structured, you prepare yourself in a more chaotic environment where there is no curriculum, there is no structured skill, and then you can learn how to learn. And now you can see that you can learn how to build a forecasting model, but this only goes so far as your willingness to actually understand and think through these things and not just have Claude think everything end to end for you. Now I'll open up that chart again. Because Claude already opened it up in a view, you can kind of see this is the very simple basic forecasting model that Claude came up with. And obviously you can tune this, make this more accurate, play around with it, have Claude change it and talk through it. And the key thing here is I didn't write a single line of code. I told it what I wanted and it built the model, ran it, gave me a chart, and that's the forecast. But this is not enough. The key part of this all is making sure that you also understand what is happening behind the scenes so that you can extend it, you can make it more accurate, you can explain to other people how to interpret it. And so I'm just showing you this because if you don't know where to start, don't know how to get the data, don't know how to build a forecasting model, this is just a very simple demo that might give you some insight of how you could start. And then from this, let's go back into Claude and then let's ask Claude to create a summary markdown of this so that we can continue to iterate on this. And over time, you can basically make this your portfolio as you understand it more, apply it for something useful. Or if you're already at a job right now too, you can also use your internal data to forecast sales, revenue for adjacent teams that will be useful and create value and help people around you. And so with that, hey Claude, now I want to turn this into a complete portfolio artifact. Can you generate a markdown file called forecastbrief.md that I can keep in this project? And then in that summary, can you include what we built, what data we use, the forecast results, the key numbers and what they mean? And then also with that too, can you also include the model accuracy, calculate the MAPE, the RMSE, the MAE, and R2, since those are the exact metrics that the job description asks for. And then explain each one in one sentence for a non-technical person can understand. And then also outline 3 scenarios for the base case, where the trend continues, the bull case, the growth accelerates, and then the bear case where the growth slows, with predicted compute for each. The business question that we're trying to answer is, if 2027 model needs that much compute, how many H100 GPUs would that take and what would it cost at $3.35 per hour? And then finally, can you also add a section of what we could do next? And with any ideas you have for extending this, where we might try a new different data set, adding more features, trying a different model, applying other data that we didn't already use, and then make it clean and readable. And then this is the artifact someone would keep in their notes and come back to. And then I will paste that and you'll see that this comes out, and we'll just wait for Claude to cook on that. It looks like Claude finished writing the summary brief. And so we'll go down and see what Claude created. And you'll notice here that in the last few videos, we set up our Obsidian environment. And so now that we have that set up, you can actually see Claude created this markdown file, and you'll see that they got the source here, and it'll just talk through pretty much everything that we built, including the chart that it created and any other requested documentation or details that we wanted, as well as how many GPUs we should buy. And I want to summarize that this is just a starting point, not the finish line. We built a forecasting model using public data about AI compute, but this works the same for any type of data, whether that be sales data, revenue data, web traffic data, support, tickets, inventory, anything that you can think about that you might need to better predict in the future how a specific metric, a specific supply that you might have so that you can better resource and plan for that. And hopefully this process with this demo will allow you to gain the confidence to do something similar yourself, and then also ask Claude how to start or why you would choose one model over the other model. As you see right here, Claude has provided us with some different techniques that we can use, but honestly, for a lot of roles, a more simple approach that is easier to explain might be better to start with, especially if you don't know forecasting or data science. To start with the simpler ones, build up your knowledge incrementally. And the first few forecasting models that you build, if this is the skill that you want to learn, it probably won't be the last forecasting model that you build. And each project that you build will then become a part of your portfolio, an artifact, instead of a certificate or a degree that you can show hiring managers or recruiters. And this allows you to create proof one project at a time. So drop a comment in the video if there's anything else that would be useful or you would like to cover.